Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. We're talking college baseball, which means I am joined by Colin Wilson, and we are just days away from Selection Monday, the 27th of May. They're going to give out the entire 64-team bracket. But before we get there, we still have some conference tournaments to sort out and lots of teams on the bubble. And with that in mind, I'm going to bring in Colin here and talk a little bit projected bracket. Obviously, in the hardwood college hoops, we talk about, bracketology from the very first weekend all the way through Selection Sunday. But now it's finally starting to heat up. It's getting real a little bit here on the diamond. So I'm going to throw out some projected regionals, and I want you to pick out the top seed that is hosting that you feel is most vulnerable. We did this last week. We're going to bring it back. Only one team from last week to this one. The other two are new. So we're going to start with Charlottesville, Virginia. The Wahoos hosting with Nebraska, James Madison, and Bryant, the 2, 3, 4 in that pod. Going to go back to Greenville, North Carolina. East Carolina, a very polarizing team on this season, and they're getting a rough draw because the number 2 team there are the Demon Deacons from Wake Forest, a Coastal Carolina team. You've been pumping the tires on the Sun Belt. You say that at least one of them is going to play spoiler in this tournament, as well as Army. And then finally, the Tallahassee region, Florida State, projected as the 11 overall seed. Southern Miss, the number 2 team there. Florida Gators, we'll get to them in a bit. Are they even going to make the field? And then finally, the Stetson Hatters, making it nearly an all-Florida affair. Of those 3 teams, Virginia, East Carolina, Florida State, who do you think is most likely to go home in the regional?
Yeah, let's get started here. I think in the Charlottesville regional that's projected, Virginia, Nebraska, JMU, and Bryant. JMU has definitely been the hottest team, the hottest name out of all this, and they're also the most desperate. Sun Belt is way better than people expect, but Nebraska, they're kind of getting pushed around here in the Big Ten the last 2 weeks. Virginia, I think, would take care of business at home. I think the Greenville and Tallahassee regionals would have serious issues. East Carolina hosting with Wake Forest as a 2, that's a real problem. Not so much Coastal Carolina or Army. Coastal Carolina is really really defrosted over the last month. And then in the Tallahassee region, this is the same thing with Southern Miss. They got hot in conference play, and then they go into the postseason hot, and then they seem to flame out in regionals. But the real interesting team here is Florida. And I think we're going to talk about Florida over and over in this podcast. They are going to be the number 1 team to watch on Monday when the selection committee comes out. This is a team that probably won't make the tournament. I think they're only 1 game above 500. They finished with 13 wins in the SEC. But I'm telling you right now, if they made a regional as a 3 seed at Tallahassee, they could absolutely beat Florida State. They could absolutely beat Southern Miss in the opener, even against Billy Oldham, whoever Southern Miss wants to throw out there. So the Gators are the hot name on this list, and I think that would be the biggest upset. It would be in Tallahassee.
Any hope for East Carolina, or is it just totally draw dependent? If this was the actual draw, do you think that they, even with a home field advantage, deserve to be a dog in that pod?
This seems to be the problem for East Carolina, is that they draw these number 1 regional seeds, and then they have to travel during supers. They almost never get a super regional seed. They've made regionals. I'll look it up. I promise it'll be in the write-up next week. I think they made regionals like 40 times in the last 45 years. I think they've only made the supers like 8 to 10. They've never made the College World Series. And the problem is when you do so well and you have a pitcher like Trey Savage who throws on Friday nights, you're going to have a lot of wins in a conference that's not up to speed with the ACCs and the SECs. So when you play host, you're inviting number 2 Wake Forest to come into your house. You're sending yourself to maybe Georgia. You're sending yourself to maybe Tennessee in the second weekend. And that's the problem that East Carolina comes up with, is they don't have 3 Trey Savages pitching. And that's where Wake Forest has an advantage, because they still have Josh Hartle and Burns, and every pitching staff has to have more than a Friday night starter, and that's what East Carolina is.
All right, let's hop into my favorite segments since we've kicked off the college baseball season, which is our quick game of pepper. We're going to hit some major topics before we get into the futures market. So you talked about who else in the SEC is on the bubble, either positively or potentially having their bubble burst on Selection Monday.
Yeah, we're doing this on Wednesday afternoon right now. South Carolina and Arkansas are in the middle of a game. So we really have Tuesday's results, but that was important because both LSU and Florida were squarely on the bubble in the SEC. Vandy was too. Well, Vandy and LSU are in. They got opening wins. LSU has already won today on Wednesday over Kentucky. They are absolutely in. I'm not sure if it should draw any interest from a futures perspective, but they're going to be in the tournament as a two seed more likely. Florida, like I said, is the biggest name going on out there. They finished 28-27, 13-8 in the SEC. They went 13-18 in quad one games, but they have the number one strength of schedule. So I think if you can find on Monday, a Florida to not be in the tournament and put that with a Florida to win the College World Series, it's actually a pretty smart bet. So I would look at that route. Now Vandy's in. Vandy holds three wins in 4 games over Florida. So we don't have to sweat the Commodores getting in if you have a future on them. They knocked them out of the SEC tournament on Tuesday. So Vandy is comfortably in. We have to see their run through this tournament to see if they're going to wake up. They did have a really tough schedule week after week. That doesn't mean they're a bad team. It just, when you play in the SEC, somebody has to lose. So we'll see if Vandy can pick it up here in this conference tournament. And if they do, maybe they're a 2 or a 3 seed that you're playing hard on in the regionals.
Selection Monday, it's going to be a long wait for a number of teams. There's about 12 teams like right there on the bubble, in or out, first 4 in, first 4 out, those kind of conversations. When I looked at Virginia Tech, 10th in slugging, they score nearly 9 runs per game, but they're clearly need a miracle to make this tournament. Losing against Duke 11-8 in the ACC tournament, they're going to get one more game against NC State. Does that make a difference at all, or are they kind of DOA headed into Selection Monday?
I think they're DOA headed in. There's, and especially, we'll roll into my next topic, which is stolen bids, right? Because, if any of these teams rise up in their conference tournaments and their RPI gets above a spot that the selection committee likes, their quad 1 and 2 games, their KPI, all this stuff that they're looking at, the Diamond Sports rating, there's so much of the committee supposedly is looking at other than RPI. And the more that bubble teams steal bids with these deep runs, the more it's going to hurt a team like Virginia Tech. So what you need to watch for, 2 teams that were on the bubble, Coastal Carolina and Vandy, they won their opening games on Tuesday. They keep winning on Wednesday. They're not a bubble team anymore. They're in. Ole Miss, Florida, out probably. They lost their opening games in SEC tournaments. We'll have to see. But the names that you want to watch this week, if you were thinking about taking a Virginia Tech future, you don't need bubble stealers. And those teams are Troy, James Madison, UNC Wilmington, and Maryland. And the deeper that those teams go, the harder it's going to be for, other teams like Virginia Tech to get in. And then, bubble bust, Kansas State lost to Kansas, not good. Louisville loses to Miami. That is terrible. They are out. Arizona State loses to Stanford. So the deep run that they needed is not going to happen. And so when you look at TCU, they upset West Virginia. They're probably in now, and they are a very interesting 3 seed. If they're going to play anywhere close to the level of last year, that's going to be a tough 3 seed to knock out. Charlotte beat UTSA. I had some pretty good coin on this on Tuesday. UTSA had bases loaded like 3 times up to the 12th inning, lost this game to Charlotte. This team, Roadrunners, were going to win their conference, lost in the last weekend, and now they get bounced out of the first round of the conference tournament. I think they could be out for good. Utah, who was really hot in Pac-12, looks like they're out. They got bumped by USC. And the team that, when we talk about, bubble teams, all that, stealing bids, that's fine. But a team like Ohio State, who's already beat Nebraska, if they make a run and win the Big Ten championship, that hurts a team like Virginia Tech too.
All right, for our audience, I kind of want to put this in the proper perspective. Say you get the good news on Selection Monday, you make the tournament. What's a realistic expectation or a run for a bubble team? Because obviously, if you're one of the last teams in, you're going to spend the next month playing away from home. So is, the stealing for a team like that, win the regional, get to Omaha? In college basketball, we see it all the time with the 11 seed play-in game kind of being a springboard, and teams have gone all the way to the Final Four from that spot. Is that something that can ever happen on the Diamonds? Is there any precedent for a situation like that?
Yeah, it seems like there's more of a correlation in baseball than there is basketball. In basketball, it used to be the rule that teams that won their conference tournament don't usually do very well in March Madness. And then you have your NC States of the world that won 5 straight. But those are anomalies. But in baseball, hey, momentum and being on a heater absolutely matters here. So I would be watching out for the 2, 3, and even the 4 seeds that weren't supposed to be there. Oral Roberts' hot streak last year started in their conference tournament. TCU's hot streak started in their conference tournament. So keep your eyes up, not just on the teams that have a good Friday night starter, but teams that are overachieving offensively can carry that over into the postseason, which is next week. So, pay attention to the teams that were hot from a runs per game and a calculated base runs in their conference tournament.
Now, what I like when we add to our futures portfolio, you're not only taking shots on teams to win the national championship, you're also betting on teams just to make it to Omaha for the College World Series. So let's start there. Who do you like and see value on the board right now?
Well, they're in. They won on Tuesday. Don't know what's going to happen here on Wednesday, but it doesn't matter. Vanderbilt is actually they're going to be in. So let's take a 4-1. There's two books out there I saw this morning that have this prop to make the College World Series. Vanderbilt plus 400. They project as a 3 seed that could be extremely dangerous. Probably not going to hedge in the opening regional. They're not going to be and they're not going to draw an SEC team. They're going to go somewhere else. They could draw Clemson. They could go to Indiana State, ECU, Oklahoma State. Those are all teams. I think that Vanderbilt could leave with a win and get into a super regional. And the super regional is where you can hedge your make college World Series bets. Vandy 4-1 is a really good one to take into supers. There's no way they'd be a minus 400 dog or minus 450 dog to anybody that is number 1 through 8 in the supers. So I like Vanderbilt 4-1 to make the College World Series.
Of those teams you mentioned that they could potentially draw, just for our audience, Clemson, Indiana State, ECU, Oklahoma State, any of those, home park advantages significant or noteworthy?
Oklahoma State is a launch pad. We just bet overs blindly there, so I can't say that they defend it very well, but I can say there's a ton of runs. ECU is a part. I wouldn't play against Trey Savage on Friday nights, and Indiana State that's going to be the most interesting regional because that is a team. We talked about this last time. They couldn't host their own regional. They had to give it up to TCU. So in their mind, this roster is going to be jacked to play at home. So it could go both ways. If they play a team that comes out offensively, that could take all of the oxygen out of them from the beginning. Clemson, on the other hand, they don't have a huge home field advantage, not like we see in other places. So I think if Vandy draws any of them, they got a shot. I think that's pretty much anybody that's not an SEC team, they've got a shot. And the good news is the committee won't pair them up with an SEC team.
Now, you'll have to forgive me, I'm a little slow on the uptake when it came to your advice on the Georgia Bulldogs, really for two and a half straight episodes. But this morning, still 25-1 to win the College World Series. I've heard enough from you. I dug through the stats myself. There's plenty to love about the Bulldogs. They're top 5 in on-base percentage, slugging, and road RPI. We talk about how important it is to be able to take your show on the road and win big games and maintain a high level of play. They're top 5 in the entire country there. And they've improved throughout the season on the back of Colton Smith, who's shown flashes of brilliance. In 3 of his last 7 starts, he's hit double-digit Ks, including 11 in a road win at Texas A&M. I was very impressed by that. So I'm looking at what their ceiling is. And then clearly, if they're going to host this regional, they've been great at Foley Field, 29-5 on their home diamond this year. So I think there's a really good shot for them to get to Omaha, and at which point I'm very comfortable hedging a 25-1 ticket. I'm surprised that it's hovered north of 20-1. Any reason to back away from Georgia? And is this, as I mentioned on the last episode, is this just the name ID? Georgia hasn't necessarily had as much success as some other teams in the SEC in recent years, but clearly they have the stats. Is this just being priced as a team that's looking to break through for the first time in a bit, or do you think that this price is a little bit more accurate?
Well, I think your national seed should dictate what your price should be in the futures market. And when it applies to SEC teams and ACC teams, I'm not going to say that because Indiana State draws an 8, that means that, they should be priced as the 8th best team to win Omaha. But in Georgia's case, 25-1 for one of the best teams in the SEC. I don't really have a lot of hesitation with this ticket because I've already got a couple of them myself at other numbers. But what you're looking for this weekend is now that Georgia's lost their opening game against LSU in the SEC tournament, they are susceptible from dropping from what was the 7 or 8 overall national seed to maybe the 9 or 10, which means they're going to host in week 1 in the regionals next week, but they're not going to be a super regional host, which could come back to bite them. We don't know. If they get slotted into that 8 and they are a super regional team, that means they more than likely won't get paired up with an SEC team at any point, and we are going to be sitting pretty with our full to win Omaha, to make to Omaha. All of those tickets are going to be in play. So really important selection committee choice coming up here. We would prefer from this podcast for Georgia to be number 7 or 8 in the super region as a super regional host.
I've been waiting for you to pull an arrow out of the quiver and go with a long shot. Looks like you have one teed up here on the West Coast.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to be all taking minus 200 and minus 150. I know we do that and I put it in the app, but I mean, college baseball, baseball's a tough sport, and we're going to take long shots at any point. You got to have some good reasoning for it. I think with San Diego, we absolutely have a great shot. 190-1, which is listed. San Diego 190-1. They project as a 2 seed and going to Corvallis. You could absolutely talk me into a team like this, going up there and playing an Oregon State team that is just having some issues right now. Vanderbilt is penciled in as the 3 up in Corvallis, so that would make it a real interesting. But 190-1, you've got a ton of options here. Also, Wright State is projected to be up there in Corvallis, so it would be a loaded field. And it's not a slam dunk ticket that we're going to have and say we're going to ride San Diego Toreros all the way to Omaha. You're going to have to start playing against it right away, depending on what region they fall in, because some of the other books I've seen are 100-1 out there. I would use that 190-1 and say, I'm going to hedge it in the regionals. I'm going to hedge it in the supers. And I would eventually create a 100-1 ticket once it gets to Omaha, but you need to make your money back. From a statistical perspective with these guys, 5th in fielding percentage, 11th in ERA, and their slugging and OBP are within the top 100. They have enough good stats, enough quality wins on the road and quad 1, quad 2 games to go to Corvallis and actually steal that regional. So let's see where they get placed. But the goal at 190-1 is to chop into it immediately because they're projected as a 2 seed. I mean, that's high for somebody that's 190-1. So we're going to chop into that number as we go through regionals and supers.
Last week, I brought UC Irvine at 60-1 to the table. I'm going to do it again here, this time the Dallas Baptist Patriots. And all the reasons you laid out that you like the Toreros of San Diego, that's the reason I like DBU here. Defense and pitching. It matters in, stressful, tense situations. They are first nationally in fielding percentage and 6th in team ERA. And they can hit the ball out of the ballpark. They're top 30 in slugging as well. They're a really quality road team, 11th in road RPI. But if I'm looking for a team to go all the way and to win in Omaha, I need to have an ace that I trust to be able to basically take games over and take the pressure off of his defense, strike out a lot of guys. I got big old Ryan Johnson at 6'6". He's a strikeout machine, averaging 13.45 Ks per 9. Only 3 other pitchers in America have thrown 80 or more innings this year with a higher K through 9 average. And if they go to Norman, Oklahoma and play the Sooners, I think an upset in the regional is on the table. The Sooners are far from an elite staff. I think the Pats can knock them around, score enough, and then lean on that defense. As I mentioned, the fact that they can field so well, it makes it less likely that you get those kind of prolonged rallies and those seeing eye singles and blowing opportunities to put double plays together and get out of jams. I really like Dallas Baptist, and I think, as I mentioned, I'm trying to collect some of these teams, this island of misfit toys that the national media has not put their eyes on. Certainly casual bettors are not racing to the window to bet UC Irvine and Dallas Baptist. I'm going to pair them up with Tennessee. Duke, unfortunately, is going in the wrong direction for me, but I also have Georgia now. So I'm trying to balance a little bit of that SEC strength and some of those plucky teams out west and in Dallas. So those are my long shot picks. I'm hoping that you agree with me on Dallas Baptist.
They're saving Santucci up for you. You're going to be just fine. Santucci, I believe, had a rib issue, right? And they went
that's right. Yeah.
for 2 weeks. Yeah, he should be good to go. If Duke wants to fall down to a lower seed, I think you and I can find some angle to play that too.
Yeah, I'm hoping on just a single game basis that there's a little bit of doubt surrounding Santucci, and then we can hammer it. Because when he brings his absolute A game, he's somebody who can give you a 7, 8, 9 innings of shutout ball, 1-run ball. So that's certainly an opportunity to buy low on a Duke team. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm holding that 19-1 ticket. I think they're up to 35-1 in the market. They're not quite at a place where I want to buy back again. I'm not going to be that stubborn, but I agree with you on a single game basis. When the pitching matchups come out, it could be a team to circle. What are your final thoughts on Dallas Baptist? I know it's a team that doesn't get a lot of national exposure until we get to tournament time, but they've been here before, so this won't be the bright lights scaring them off come NCAA tournament.
Yeah, no matter who Dallas Baptist gets drawn up with, I mean, they could be facing Ryan Prager and Texas A&M in game 1. I'm going to back Ryan Johnson if you're going to give me plus money or if you're going to give me some plus on the run line. So they definitely have the Friday night starter. Ryan Johnson, in my opinion, supersedes a lot of Friday night starters with the exception of maybe Hagen Smith and Prager, but you're going to take plus money on him no matter what. And that gives them a good leg up. They've got to get over the hump. They have been here so many times. And sometimes they just run into teams with better offenses. I can think of Texas Tech, and you don't want to go to Texas Tech and have them just bomb stuff all day. So let's see who they get drawn up with. If they get sent to the Oklahoma State regional, could be, 20 runs per game. We'll find out, but it's going to be matchup dependent, but we'll be looking for it next week.
For Colin Wilson, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. We are going to have so much college baseball content, not just on this podcast feed, but also over on YouTube and TikTok, where Action Network, all of our live video is going to live. And it's going to get started next week. We got Selection Monday coming out. We're going to have reactions to the bracket. As soon as those numbers go live, usually you have it within a few hours. Overnight, they're going to settle in a bit, and we're going to start to give our opinions on the matchups, not only to get out of the regionals, but how you should be playing those first, ace versus ace pitching matchups. So Colin will be omnipresent in that regard, and we'll be back as a podcast next week to break down the bracket in full, talking about, because really, as we mentioned many times, it's not just your players, it's your path. So these paths are going to set up, and there's going to be some interesting opportunities. You've talked a lot about Oklahoma State, Colin, in the last couple episodes. I think that is going to be the group of death, to steal a phrase from the World Cup. I think anybody could get out of there if we see teams like Oregon, Mississippi State picking up steam in the SEC tournament as we speak. So it'll be really interesting to see who plays in Stillwater, as well as the reveal of the entire 64-team tournament. That's it for us. Please like and subscribe. And a reminder, if you go ahead and leave a 5-star review, we'd be happy to give out some Action Network swag, as well as a $10 future on a team of your choice to win the College Baseball World Series. I'm a man of my word. Hit me up on Twitter. Happy to do it. And thanks so much for listening.